God is about to reveal to you a secret that not many people in the world are aware of. I want you to join me this morning so that we can uncover the secret of the kingdom this morning. God bless you. Thank you for joining us. I want to ask all our committed viewers to please make sure that they share these messages to whichever platform that is available to them, so that God can do His work and speed up His coming. Last week I introduced you to the book of Jubilees. It is almost an exact copy of Genesis, except that it gives us more details of events that have taken place since the creation of life on earth and all the acts that have been performed by all the ancient patriarchs. And it is an entrusted copy to the Essenes, a copy which was found in the caves of Qumran. I want to read to you from the book of Jubilees, chapter 6. And this testimony is written concerning you, that you should observe it continually, so that you should not eat on any day any blood of beasts or birds or cattle during all the days of the earth. And the man who eats the blood of beasts or of cattle or of birds during all the days of the earth, he and his seed shall be rooted out of the land. Verse 13. And do thou command the children of Israel to eat no blood, so that their names and their seed may be before the Lord our God continually. And for this law there is no limit of days, for it is forever. Genesis 9:4 confirms this. But you shall not eat flesh with its life, that is, its blood. Deuteronomy 12 tells us more. Only be sure that you do not eat the blood, for the blood is the life. You may not eat the life with the meat. Beloved, I think it is quite clear, the instruction of the Lord. But I want to identify a specific word that I read to you, and that word is seed. I want to look at a brief description of what it is. We all know what it is, but I just want to look at it as to what it is identified as in the dictionary. The unit of production of a flowering plant. Well, a seed can be anything, but they're talking about a flowering plant, capable of developing into another such plant. That's what a seed is. And so God is saying that in order for your children to remain the seed I made them, they must not eat the blood of an animal, because the life of the animal is in the blood. Now, I explained this in many sermons before, but I'm going to share with you once again what it really means. As you well know, that our life, our character, what spiritually we know as our spirit develops in us over a period of time. It is not our soul. And that spirit is housed in our USB, our DNA. And the animal has the same spirit. Animals have no souls. They have spirits. They have character. They have their life experience is all inside of them. That's how they learn tricks. When you teach a dog something, he inherits that wisdom of how to do something, and it's logged into his DNA. That forms part of his character. If you have to kill an animal and you drink the blood of that animal, you are drinking his character, and so polluting your seed, your DNA. And that is what God is forbidding. Because if you drink something or eat something with blood in it, it means that you're drinking the life, the character, or the spirit of that animal. It's coming into you, and your seed will be corrupted. So God is talking to Israel, and He's saying, make sure that you eat no blood, so that your seed, your children, can't be contaminated, and so that they can appear before me. This is a warning that God is giving to Israel. And as you can see, this warning wasn't given once. It was given several times. So there is a specific significance to this ordinance that God is giving to Israel. Now, I have written a book. Many of you might have read it. This book details about how a person can get possessed with the character of another person or of an animal in particular. If you'll notice that if you study serial killers, they have a history of slaughtering animals when they are very young. They kill animals, and the blood of that animal penetrates their bodies, and they become animal-like. That's why they can kill with no remorse and no afterthought. They have no conscience because their spirits or their seed is mixed with an animal spirit. So basically God is suggesting as well that if you start to mix seeds of other creatures by drinking their blood, you will become a mixed being with bipolar characteristics. You'll have the character of an animal or an insect or a creature mixed with and then your children won't be pure seed. You can't reproduce the same seed that you are through your children and going down the line. I'm going to take you to the book of Jubilees chapter 6. This particular chapter deals with the flood that Noah had to endure. It specifically talks about the events after Noah came out of the ark after the waters have receded. And God has a conversation with Noah concerning matters to come. But more specifically, this book of Jubilees is referring to telling Moses on Mount Sinai. You remember I told you, Moses went up to Mount Sinai for 40 days and 40 nights, during which time God told an angel to write down the events of history so that Moses can make a record of it and he can distribute it amongst the Jewish people. So they all will be aware. The first time these laws were written was the book of Enoch. And God tells Moses, I also mentioned these things in the first law, but I'm going to give it to you now so that you can properly document it and make sure what is known as the law of Moses, that law becomes familiar to all Israelites from here on in. And so when he went up to the mountain, God was telling him this specific event when Noah came out of the ark, the conversation he had with Noah. Let's read. He set his bow in the cloud. This is interesting. I'll tell you why in a moment. He set his rainbow in the cloud for a sign of the eternal covenant, that there should not again be a flood on the earth to destroy it all the days of the earth. Genesis 9:13, I set my rainbow in the cloud, and it shall be for the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Why is this interesting? Firstly, I have to mention to you once again that this book was written some 1300 years or so before Jesus came. That's about 3,300 years ago. And it's documented and verified by science that it is of a certain age. So there is no doubt that whoever put pen to paper did it over 3,000 years ago. Now, what's interesting is, how would they, lay people, who are not any science lecturers, know that the rainbow is connected to water when the sun shines through it? God specifically mentions in the book of Genesis, which is a copy of Jubilees, that I set my rainbow in the cloud. You see, without a cloud, without raindrops, you cannot have a rainbow. Let me tell you about the history, the rainbow scientific history. In book 1 of Naturalis, which was written 65 AD, that means after Jesus came and died, this book was written. The Roman philosopher Seneca the Younger discusses various theories of the formation of rainbows extensively, including those of Aristotle. He notices that rainbows appear always opposite to the sun, that they appear in water sprayed by a rower, in the water spat by a fuller, on clothes stretched on pegs, or by water sprayed through a small hole in a burst pipe. He even speaks of rainbows produced by small rods of glass, anticipating Newton's experience with prisms. This guy only came to have a basic understanding of how rainbows are formed. It's a basic, primitive understanding. But it happened 1300 years after God told this to Noah. Now, there's no other way that Moses or Noah could have known, because it was the first time that they sighted it in the sky. And it was only classified as caused by raindrops or water much later on. There is the first sign of faith that you need to understand, that our God orchestrates the secrets in heaven. But that's not the big secret. We're going to go forward now. Jubilees chapter 6. I'm going to read to you 17 and 18 in two parts. And God says, for this reason it is ordained and written on the heavenly tablets that they should celebrate the Feast of Weeks. Make a note of that. In this month, once a year, to renew the covenant each year. Genesis 8:4. And on the 17th day of the 7th month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. Now we go back to Jubilees chapter 6 verse 18. And this whole festival was celebrated in heaven. Oh, that's a mighty declaration by God. This Feast of Weeks celebration, firstly, was written on the tablets in heaven, and then it was celebrated from the day of creation till the days of Noah. Let's read that again. And this whole festival was celebrated in heaven from the day of creation till the days of Noah. That tells me that this event was preordained. God saw it happening before it even happened. In fact, before He put Adam there. And so heaven was celebrating that event. The destruction of all evil. Celebrating the rainbow way back in heaven. Let's continue. 26 jubilees, 1,335 years, and 5 weeks of years. And Noah and his sons observed it for 7 jubilees, 357 years, and 1 week of years, till the day of Noah's death. And from the day of Noah's death, his sons did away with it until the days of Abraham, and they ate blood. Wow. First, the celebration was preordained. Second, God knew that humans will eat the blood of animals. It might have been done in a literal sense during the very early years, like what he's talking about in the time of Abraham. But in order for the devil to defile man, he has to make sure the masses eat the blood of animals. The masses must have access so the devil can round up all of humanity and make them disobey the commandment not to eat the blood of animals. I'm getting ahead of myself. Exodus chapter 34. And you shall observe the feast of weeks of the first fruits of wheat harvest, and the feast of ingathering at the year's end. God is saying there's 2 things you need to celebrate here. The first is the feast of weeks, and the second is the first fruits of wheat harvest, of whatever husbandry does. That's the 2 events you have to celebrate. And remember that flood and the rainbow. This event, the Feast of Weeks, in Hebrew it's called Shavuot or Shavos. In some Ashkenazi usage, weeks, commonly known in English as the Feast of Weeks, is a Jewish holiday that occurs on the 6th day of the Hebrew month Sivan. It may fall between May 15th and June 14th. In fact, right dead center of where we are right now. That's on the Gregorian calendar. Now it's interesting, in the Jewish tradition, the months of the Jewish year are lunar in nature. Unlike the months of the Gregorian calendar, the calendar that you and I use, solar year, that is the norm in the world today, the months of the Jewish year reflect the phases of the moon. I want to just give you an idea of the Jewish months. The Jewish month starts in Kislev, November, December. That's the first month in the Jewish calendar. But in the Gregorian calendar, It is the 11th month. The month in which the Feast of Weeks must be celebrated is called Sivan. That is the 7th month. That is the day that Noah's ark, remember, landed. And the instructions were given. Sivan, May, June, Feast of Weeks, the Feast of First Fruits or Harvest or Agriculture. That is the two celebrations that must take place. Jubilee 6 continues, for it is the Feast of Weeks and the Feast of First Fruits. This feast is twofold and of a double nature. According to what is written and engraved concerning it, celebrate it. 22, for I have written in the book of the first law, that is Enoch, and on the new moon of the first month, and on the new moon of the fourth month, and on the new moon of the 7th month, and on the new moon of the 10th month are the days of remembrance, and the days of the seasons in the 4 divisions of the year. These are written and ordained as a testimony forever. Underline forever. This must not cease. Whether it's Old Testament, New Testament, it must not stop. It is an everlasting covenant. What is God doing here by giving them the divisions of the month? He says you celebrate it on the first month, on the 4th month, on the 7th month, and on the 10th month. Do you know what he's doing? He is dividing the year into 4 portions. First quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarter. He says in each quarter, you will have received a harvest. And so you need to take that harvest and you need to give first fruit celebration to honor that God has made you able to produce wheat or whatever comes from the field. Even the grazing of animals depend on how the grass will grow, whether there's a drought, whether there's extra rains. All these things is a thankfulness to God that you come back and you offer Him the first fruit. That's why the first fruit offering, the tithe, in other words, is not a covenant that you can just abandon because you're living in the New Testament. It is an everlasting covenant. In other words, he's saying for whatever you put your effort in and you earn on that field, you bring in what you earn, but the reason why you earn it, the reason why you are able to bring it in is because I make the provision. And so there's a thankfulness that you need to celebrate every quarter. So God in fact divided the year into 4 portions. In the northern hemisphere, the first month, Kislev, November, is the beginning of winter. The 4th month, Adar, is the beginning of spring. 7th month, Sivan, the beginning of summer. 10th month, Elul, the beginning of autumn. Now that you know these months and how the year has to be broken down, the Gregorian calendar changed it and they made the first month January instead of November. Let's continue with Jubilees. We are on a very interesting part. 24, and Noah ordained them for himself as feasts for the generations forever, so that they have become thereby a memorial unto him. And on the new moon of the first month, that is winter, he was forbidden to make for himself an ark. On that day, the earth became dry, and he opened the ark and saw the earth. So on that particular day, when the Feast of Weeks were supposed to be celebrated, remember that heaven was already celebrating way before this happened. Noah didn't know that. But God told him, you cannot work on this day. This is a day that I have reserved. Only later on did Noah get advised what was this day all about. And on the new moon of the 4th month, the mouths of the depths of the abyss beneath were closed. And on the new moon of the 7th month, Sivan, all the mouths of the abyss of the earth were opened, and the waters began to descend into them. And on the new moon of the 10th month, autumn, the tops of the mountains were seen, and Noah was glad. Now, just something interesting, the old Jewish documents tell us that up to very recently, the Jewish people used to go up to the mountaintop to do this Feast of Weeks celebration, just like because Noah landed there, and they were threatened by the inhabitants, and so they stopped that festival. And on this account, he ordained them for himself as feasts for a memorial forever, and thus are they ordained. And they placed them on the heavenly tablets. Listen to this, this is so interesting. Each had 13 weeks. That means a season. That means 3 months. From one to another passed their memorial. From the first to the second, and from the second to the third, and from the third to the fourth. All the days of the commandments will be 52 weeks of days. Listen. 52 weeks, that's what the festival of the weeks are. God divided the year into 52 weeks. And it started when he gave Noah the order. He says, from now on, I want you to divide the year into 52 weeks, 52 sevens. He is the one, God himself, that gave Noah the wisdom to separate the months, to separate the seasons, and to give the number of weeks in a total year. In fact, that same number of weeks, 52, is what the Gregorian calendar uses now. That is the wisdom that they borrowed or stole from God himself. Let's read that again. And all the days of the commandments will be 52 weeks of days, and these will make the entire year complete. Thus it is engraven and ordained on the heavenly tablets. Listen, beloved, this is the birth of the calendar. This is the birth. These people, Copernicus came much later. They didn't know that it took 365 days or 52 weeks for the earth to go around the sun. They would not be able to know on their own unless God told them. The Gregorian calendar was much later, a carbon copy, except that they moved the dates around. Verse 31, and there is no neglecting this commandment for a single year or from year to year. So God is saying, the fact that I divided the year, the festival of the weeks, I do not want you to stop celebrating it. I do not want you to stop celebrating the feast of the first fruits. And command thou the children of Israel that they observe the years according to this reckoning. 364 days. My goodness. God was so accurate in telling how many days will make a year. And these will constitute a complete year. And they will not disturb its time from its days and from its feasts. For everything will fall out in them according to their testimony. And they will not leave out any day, nor disturb any feasts. This is the next line is so vital. But if they do neglect and do not observe them according to his commandment, then they will disturb all the seasons, and the years will be dislodged from this order. And they will disturb the seasons, and the years will be dislodged, and they will neglect their ordinances. And all the children of Israel will forget and will not find the path of the years, And they will forget the new moons and the seasons and Sabbaths, and they will go wrong as to all the order of the years. Wow. God is saying these ordinances that I'm giving you to celebrate the Feast of Weeks, that I created this calendar. Give me credit. Celebrate it. Give me my first fruit offering. If you don't do this, I am going to upset the seasons. I'm going to command the seasons to displace their order, because I am in charge of creating the seasons. Now, a geographic website tells us, as the world warms, the seasons are shifting. In the UK, it's often difficult to feel too worried about a longer summer. Although recently perhaps they've come with a disquieting feeling, a sense that something is amiss. Now, a new study by researchers at the University of Chinese Academy of Sciences in Beijing has confirmed it. As the world has warmed, the seasons have shifted. Let's stop there. In fact, they go on to say there's false springs, and crops are not yielding like how they used to yield, and they're dying early. So God is saying, listen, because these people will forget, I will disrupt the seasons. I mean, you would have noticed that we have winters now for like 5 or 6 months. You have summers that are short. The days are not even correct. And you have been seeing in the news and all over what I've been sharing that there's floods, there's something off with the weather. It's not allowing growers to produce in the field. It's not allowing healthy production of crop, of grain, of wheat, besides the wars and all the other factors. There's something amiss with the soil. Climate change website tells us shifting season. The growing seasons are shifting. In other words, the seasons that you have to harvest, the wheat or whatever you plant, it's shifting. Spring is arriving earlier, winters are shorter, and the number of freezing days is declining. And it goes on. Changes in the timing of these events, spring thaw or songbirds migration, for example, can have adverse effects on the ecosystem, because different species may respond to different environmental cues, resulting in misalignment between species that may rely on one another. This is what the Kabbalah calls climate change. Something is happening. You see, if a hummingbird or whatever bird leaves and migrates to another area before time, because they go with the geological clock, then it affects the entire ecology of a region. The worms that were supposed to be eaten eat the plants because the birds are gone, and it has a chain reaction. And this, you see, God told them, if you don't observe this thing, I will upset the seasons. This is interesting. Not as interesting as we're going to get to in a moment. I'm going to tell you about a term. It's called precession. Precession was the third discovered motion of the earth. And after the far more obvious daily rotation and annual revolution, precession is caused by the gravitational influence of the sun and the moon acting on the earth's equatorial bulge. Now, we all know that the moon affects the tides. But here we're learning of a term called precession. Precession means that the moon, being in a certain position, will affect how the earth turns and all the ecology associated with the earth. Precession is the force that allows the earth to move in a certain direction on a certain timeline, and it creates certain environment that revolves around seasons. And so the precession is very important. The moon's precession must stay constant, so that everything on earth stays constant. So God is saying, listen, I'm going to upset the order if you don't follow what I've told you. And when that order of seasons and growing and planting and everything changes, you're going to suffer the consequences. And the way I'm going to do that, you're going to look at the skies and see something is amiss. And that's why the Cabal elites, these Satan worshippers, are in a form of panic, because they want to cut down all sorts of things so that they preserve the planet until they can make a plan to get out of here. And so they're making these laws and rules. We'll get to that in a moment. But I want to tell you about the moon's influence. The Earth's axis is tilted at 23.5 degrees from the ecliptic. That angle is responsible for the seasons. Without the moon's pull, precession would be even slower, but it would be larger. Larger precession means a greater season change in the tilt of the Earth's axis, which means that the nature of the seasons would change. Wow. God has great power, beloved. Jubilee 6. For there will be those who will assuredly make observations of the moon. God is saying there's going to come a time when they start to make observations. How it disturbs the seasons and how comes in from year to year 10 days too soon. For this reason the years will come upon them when they will disturb the order. For this reason I command and testify to thee, that thou mayest testify to them. For after thy death thy children will disturb them, so that they will not make the year 364 days only. And for this reason they will go wrong as to the new moons and seasons and Sabbaths and festivals, and they will eat all kinds of blood with all kinds of flesh. Beloved, yes, we're going to get to that in a moment. But God is saying, man, that if you interfere with the number of days that I have dedicated, 364, do you know what they did? They altered it to 365 and a half. God says they're going to do that. And when they do that, I am going to bring a curse, and you will see the seasons change. I mean, how did God know? They had a simple instructions, keep it at 364. But they changed it. Let me tell you when that changed. Let's look at a website that speaks about it. The origins of the modern calendar as we know it date back to the Roman times. Julius Caesar introduced the Julian calendar in 46 BC, which consists of 365 days with 366 in every fourth year. Listen, these words were written by Moses now, that God told him that these guys are going to change the calendar that I'm giving you. I mean, you must always remember at the back of your mind, this document was written way before they even changed it. But it happened just after Jesus died. They changed the calendar. You know, all these things I'm telling you about how God controls things and how He prophesies things and how correct He is, how organized He is, how well thought of, how much He has the world, the earth in His hands. That should give you confidence. It should be able to build your faith. You see, more knowledge gives you more power. And as you learn and absorb and understand the depth of God, the ability for Him to have, even with the devil running around and trying to confuse things, He even controls the events that seem out of His hand. That's why, you know, even in your personal life and my life, the enemy might regard us as just little ants. But to God, especially when you are a God-conscious person, you are a special design. He knows you by name, every hair on your head He knows. He knows the marriage issues that you're going through. He knows the financial stress that you are under. He knows everything. And listen, He has worked out a way for you if you love Him. He has His plan in the palm of His hand for you. You just have to commit your life to Him. Do what He says, and He will make a way for you. Even when your back is against the wall, He understands the loneliness you might feel. He understands the pressure, the pain that your heart is having right now. And so God is making a way for you. I want you to have faith by just listening to the authority of God over the things that have happened and are even happening now that He knew all about. Genesis 9:20, and Noah began to be a husbandman, and he planted a vineyard. Do you see that? That's the same profession that Adam was. It's the same profession that happened, that the children were, Cain and Abel. It's the same profession that even Isaac and Jacob were. So what I'm saying to you, beloved, is that this husbandry, this planting, reaping, harvesting, it has a special place in the devil's heart to corrupt the plan of God. So let's see what God gave warnings to Moses about. First He says they will change the calendar, which they have done. Then He says they will eat blood. Then He says, and the moon alters its position. And this alteration of the position will cause climate changes, which will lead to natural disasters like flood and so forth. So God is giving them an idea of what happens if He instructs the moon to just move out of the position. Because the moon is responsible for the Feast of Weeks. And if we remove the moon from its place, there's going to be disaster on the earth. But these two things you must take special note of. He talks about the moon, and He talks about these people eating blood. This is very interesting, beloved. He talks about the moon, and He talks about the blood. He says, and He's telling them the moon, He's telling Moses, the moon will alter its position, and the seasons will change. And then He said, these people will be eating blood. Let me explain in context what that means. Let's look at Joel chapter 2 verse 31. The sun shall be turned into darkness and the moon into blood before the coming of the great and awesome day of the Lord. You see, that's why sometimes scientists and these educated people think that Christians are off because they actually believe the moon will turn into actual blood. So I want you to bear with me. In the original translation, there's a word that is used into blood. It's called yedam. And it comes from the word Adam. It means life in flesh. Adam. That's where Adam got his name from. Adam. And when life is in blood, he's referring to that Adam. Now that I've given you what Joel 2 says, let me explain this in a way that you might understand. When the moon is shifting from its place, there's going to be calamity on the earth, and these people will see, these evil people will see, the devil will know it's time. And because the time is short, they're going to weaponize something to make sure that all of humanity is subject to eating blood. So the moon is going to turn into blood, is actually a means by which God is informing the coming of the end events. But let me get more detail into it. Let's see what Jesus says in the book of Matthew 24. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. There is no mention of the blood there. He's specifically saying the moon will not be able to shine on the earth, which will cause seasons to change, which will cause climate change and calamities and weathers that we haven't seen before, floods and disasters, and a whole lot of things are going to happen. So he's telling us that, listen, this is not the moon into blood. He's explaining it. Revelations tell us further, 6:12, I looked when he opened the sixth seal, and behold, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became like blood. Now, when you read the Greek context, as well as the Aramaic, you realize what he's saying is that the moon, when the sixth seal is broken, the moon is going to move away, not give its light, and that's going to cause these Kabbalists to make, it's going to cause the blood sin to happen. So the moon turning into blood or being like blood, it actually means that moving away of the moon, God is going to move the moon from its position. And it's going to give rise to humans eating blood. That's what it means. But let's talk about this. Let me tell you what. Now, you do know that this thing that they're putting inside the arms, you do realize by now that it is mixed with an animal life. They want to put the animal life character inside of a human being. That is, firstly, akin to eating blood. But they're going to do one thing even more further. Let's listen to the CEO, this Bola man, the same man who didn't want to do that to himself first. He said he doesn't want to do it to himself and his family. He wants to give everybody an opportunity. He doesn't want it to get finished. What a liar. Let's listen to what he has to say.
It is basically biological chip that it is in the tablet. And once you take the tablet and dissolves into your stomach, sends a signal that you took the tablet. So imagine the applications of that, compliance. The insurance companies to know that the medicines that patients should take, they do take them. It is fascinating what happens in this field.
Well, he's telling you this, and I'm going to read to you the synopsis related to the video. The CEO, Albert Bola, explains this new tech to Davos crowd. That means he's talking there in Davos right now. Ingestible pills. A pill with a tiny chip that sends a wireless signal to relevant authorities when the pharmaceutical has been digested. Imagine the compliance, he says. He then says, these are very interesting words, a biological seed. You're going to be swallowing blood. And what gave birth to the urgency? The moving of the moon, the changing of seasons, the curse of God. They're looking everywhere and they can see the time is short. So they're spearheading and they're feeling they need to move fast now to contaminate most or all of humanity if that's possible. And Jesus says, listen, when he was speaking, you remember I played to you or read to you before, he says, listen, this generation, this seed, this human seed, this human genome, genetics, will not change until I come. Not everybody is going to change, but the devil will change as many as he can, especially if there's ignorance involved. A News Punch article tells us this: the Great Reset, UN joins World Economic Forum to ban oil, gas and coal use. These two guys traipsing around the world and they're joining together forces. I mean, we all know that they're all one organization. The UN chief Antonio Guterres on Wednesday has vowed to ban all oil, gas and coal use on a global scale as part of a self-described global climate Marshall Plan. They want to stop this climate change. They feel it's going out of control. You know, I don't know whether these monkeys know what's really happening. Whether they think it's happening by accident or what, but you see, the devil, their God, knows what's happening. And our God knows, he's orchestrating everything. These guys are rushing to prolong life on earth. That's why they want to cut emissions. They want to cut oil, because to farm oil is CO2 is going to released in the atmosphere. They feel that's the thing that's creating climate change. They don't realize that it's created because the moon is shifting. This Portuguese socialist, Guterres, spoke ahead of the upcoming World Economic Forum annual meeting in Davos, Switzerland, which has also called for a ban on all carbon emissions. To avoid a climate emergency, humanists must end fossil fuel pollution and accelerate the renewable energy transition before we incinerate our only home, Guterres said. For its part, the WEF has published a 10-point plan provided by the International Energy Agency as a way to end oil dependence as part of its declared Great Reset. There are 10 things that's listed there, but I'm just going to read to you 5. Reduce speed limits on highway by at least 10 kilometers per hour. That means they feel your car is making too much of gas. In fact, they go on to another point to say that they want to create electric cars and everybody must buy electric cars. They want you not to travel to work. They want you to work at home for 3 days a week where possible. They want to have car-free Sundays in cities. Some cities already around the world have car-free Sundays. They want you to walk, stay at home, ride a bicycle. You cannot drive your car or buy fuel on a Sunday. They'll start there. They want to reduce public transport prices and incentivize walking and cycling. Alternate private car access to roads in large cities. They don't want to allow private cars to go into large cities. They want public transport. If you don't have it, you stay at home. You see this Great Reset thing. They have mantras that they sing, and all the leaders sing the same mantras. I'm going to play you a clip just so that you have an idea of what they do.
Has provided an opportunity for a reset.
It is called the Great Reset. Why are they so suspicious of institutions?
But as we try to build back from this global...
Joe Biden calls it Build Back Better.
Build back better.
Building back better.
To do things differently. To build back better.
We're going to build it back better.
And build it back better.
To my plan to build back better.
This is an organisation that profits from famine and disease, known as the World Economic Forum.
With everything falling apart, we can reshape the world in ways we couldn't before. Ways that better address so many of the challenges we face. And that's why so many are calling for a great reset.
This organisation pushes fear and tragedies to further its own agenda.
We know now that the next crisis is already waiting for us around the corner.
One that will dictate what you own, what you eat, what you think, under the guise of a sustainable future.
With climate change set to dwarf the damage caused by the message from 2020 should be abundantly clear.
Capitalism, as we know it, is dead.
And when someone calls this a conspiracy theory, they don't realise that the information is right under their nose.
We want to be a very transparent organization.
There's 2 things to take note of here. The first was build back better. It's like a mantra. That's the Great Reset message. They want to convince the world to accept what they want to do so that we can build the world better. The other part of that clip, you can see that it's like all the news channels, they have like exact words, like they got a script from a head office somewhere, and no matter which part of the world these news media outlets are, they are getting their news readers to read the exact same words.
COVID-19 plagued our television screens, social media timelines, radios, and the newspapers. For the first time in a long time, or at least since the dawn of the climate scare, the entire human race was told that they were facing the same threat and was tasked to work together to put an end to it.
Millions of Americans staying at home are relying on Amazon. Millions of Americans staying at home are relying on Amazon.
That's why you cannot trust the mainstream media. In fact, just recently, I was reading an article that South Africa's favorite Leanne Manus got knighted by a Frenchman, Emmanuel Macron. And we know that he's a mascot of the World Economic Forum. And this woman was educated in the Cabal country, Trinity College London. They do that. They educate, even politicians were educated all in that area of the world. They educate them, they bring them to take control, but the massa is still in Britain. Now you'll remember when we had this, the only person who was making a lot of money more than anybody else was Amazon. And Jeff Bezos owns Amazon. He made a killing during that period, and he's still doing so now. And so they probably obligated him. An article tells us that he contributed 10 billion to the Great Reset, the Save the Planet project. He's got a project called the Earth Fund, and it's touted by the WEF. That same Earth Fund is Save the Planet. They don't realize that the moon is moving, and whatever they do is beyond their control. They just think they are in control. They think that what they do is in their hand. They think they control us and the world. They don't realize they have absolutely no control. Everything is happening. The strings are being pulled in heaven by my Father, not their Father. The Tribune India tells us, control oil and you control the nations. Control food and you control people. Henry Kissinger wrote that. And you know Henry Kissinger was a eugenist. Now we'll talk about UNESCO for a moment. It's a United Nations educational, scientific and cultural organization. It's part of the United Nations, which also is in partnership now, as we saw before, with the WEF. But the founder of UNESCO, the one that founded it in 1945, let's read about him. The founder of UNESCO, Julian Huxley, the organization from the UN, made it very clear that they have believed in a one world government under the United Nations from the very beginning, and they do not believe in democracy. Let's learn a little bit about Huxley. Sir Julian Huxley, he was even knighted, was an English evolutionary biologist, eugenist, and internationalist. He was a proponent of natural selection and a leading figure in the mid-20th century modern synthesis. He was a secretary of the Zoological Society of London, the first director of UNESCO, a founding member of the World Wildlife Fund, the president of the British Eugenics Society, and the first president of the British Humanist Association. Now, eugenics, I taught you this before, is a set of beliefs and practices that aim to improve the genetic quality of a human population, historically by excluding people and groups judged to be inferior. So they wanted only the survival of the rich. They wanted to kill blacks. I mean, they've been doing it for very long. When you're non-white, that's what they believe, the eugenists. They believe that if you are non-white, you are inferior. Now, these people are alarmed that there's going to be food shortage. Some of them they're creating for their own reasons and agenda. United Nations Guterres says this.
The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization has warned the world is facing a potential food crisis with soaring prices and millions in danger of severe hunger. It comes as the war in Ukraine threatens supply of key staple crops. The prospect that the Black Sea grain trade will be permanently affected or that entire regions may not be cultivated, the UN agency says, is fueling speculation, given that Russian and Ukrainian planes account for 7% of world production but 24% of grain exports. Ukraine may not be able to gather in their harvest, and Russia is under sanctions.
Food, fuel, and fertilizer prices are skyrocketing. Supply chains are being disrupted, and the costs and delays of transportation of imported goods, when available, are at record levels. And all of this is hitting the poorest, the hardest, and planting the seeds for political instability and unrest around the globe.
And that unrest is already happening. In Sudan, thousands protested in the capital and several other cities against a rapid deterioration in living conditions, including a sharp rise in the price of bread. On Sunday, the main food staple for most Sudanese rose by more than 40%.
In America, there's also a baby formula shortage. I don't know if you've seen that.
But store shelves in the United States are running out of infant and toddler formula. The tracking firm Data Assembly reports there's 43% less of it nationwide. Supply chain problems started the trouble, and a factory closure in Michigan made it worse. Abbott Nutrition, maker of the popular Similac brand, halted production after several babies got sick and 2 died after drinking possibly contaminated formula. The government investigated and found no further danger, but the company says it will be weeks before production resumes.
In India, these people are struggling. They're losing power. They can't get. It's not shown much in the news, but like ESCOM in South Africa, they're cutting the power. These people can't produce goods. Then in Sri Lanka president, poor guy, came on air recently and he says, we got no money in the bank, we don't have any dollars. If you guys got dollars in the community, can you please put it in the bank so the bank will have money? They are bankrupt. They can't produce. There's no fuel. Watch this.
Well, I would say the last administration is to blame. And they've run down the economy. We've come to a point where we are bankrupt, which has never happened to Sri Lanka before. We have no dollars, we have no rupees.
Another article tells us Shanghai is starving. You know, there's 25 million people in Shanghai are in lockdown. They cannot come out of their houses because of this disease.
For weeks, the streets of Shanghai have been empty. Supermarkets are shut. Delivery workers that would normally be weaving their way through the city are nowhere to be seen. Social media is full of cries for help and complaints about a lack of food. Some videos show unrest in neighborhoods where people are desperate to find food. And in one unverified video, people are even seen looting a supermarket. Authorities are scrambling to deliver supplies, but there are huge problems.
Their ships, they have containers full of food that cannot leave the port and it's going to rot in there. And the world relies on Chinese exports of goods and services that they cannot get anymore because these ports are on lockdown.
Well, the ports, you can imagine, are probably stacking up. Containers are definitely stacking up. Trucks and truck drivers are not, there's not enough of them, for one, not being able to come in and get the goods that have come in from the ships. And that is having a chain reaction out to the offshore where the container ships are also stacking up. It's just a logistics bottleneck right now at the world's biggest port, Shanghai. Shanghai and Yangshan, and then just across the bay is Ningbo and Zhongshan. These are 2 of the 3 biggest shipping container ports in the world, and they are feeling the stress right now. Ocean Network Express estimates congestion at Chinese ports is gridlocking about 10% right now of the global container ship fleet.
Beloved, just so that you know, there's a new outbreak called monkeypox. It's generally circulating amongst people who are gay, and it just looks terrible, and it's infectious, and it's spreading to different parts of the world. And you might be able to see that's another disease that's spreading. But I'm expecting that there's something even more devastating that is going to hit the world, probably by November or so. It's going to be very bad, and it's going to hurt the economy, people's lives, and more importantly, take lives. So I want you to pray that God has His hand upon you, and that nothing that they do, especially when it comes to your life, will have any effect on you. Luke 21:11. And great earthquakes shall be in diverse places, and famines and pestilences. Jesus knew this because He knew Father is going to move the moon. And He knew these are the resulting forces that will happen. Pestilences, earthquakes. There's a lot of things that are going to happen because people have eaten blood. People want to force down blood down people's throats, and they don't celebrate the Feast of Weeks. They don't celebrate the Feast of the First Fruit. Listen, I cannot force you, anyone. Just a friendly reminder. Some people might be watching this, and God does something inside of you that makes you excited, that gives you confirmation and hope that He is alive, that He knew things before man came to know, that He knew the decisions they will make. All these things should give you an affirmation that your Father lives, that He has your life in His hands. And lots of people might get excited, and even when we started very early on, lots of people were excited, they were blessed. And as soon as life opened up, as soon as they started to interact with people and their work and so forth, they started to neglect the food that they receive on a Sunday morning. And sometimes they get distracted because their life goes through something. Maybe they have a marital problem. Usually on a Sunday they'll get up, they'll put the video on, the sermon, they'll watch it, they'll feed themselves. But there comes a time when people go through issues, marriage problems, maybe they don't have enough money for their bond, and the problems weigh on them. And they come on a Sunday morning, they don't feel like listening, in fact they neglect it. But that's where your food comes from. Maybe you're having home issues, you're renting, you have to move out. I don't know what the issues are, but you start to, not that you don't love God, you just start to pull away. That's what the devil wants. And so the strength that you should be getting from the knowledge, you don't have, you lack it. And that's why you won't have the impetus to go to the next day without getting depressed. And that's why the devil has many people in the palm of his hands. And it seems like there's a constant curse. So I want to advise you to press on. Whether things in your life are going good or whether they're going bad, whether there's problems or whether there's not, I want you to have a commitment that I'm going to feed myself no matter what. The Word of God that I receive is going to empower me, and I will get rejuvenated. And you see, that's your key. God removes the things that are obstacles to you, but you first have to ignore them. You first have to make sure that that doesn't distract you. So this morning, I want to pray with you. I want to offer God's hand over you and make sure that everyone that is in His fold, that comes under the voice or under the sound of my prayer for you, you will never let God's hand go. Let us pray. Beloved, don't forget next week is communion. Let us raise our hands together to the Father. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your love and your protection. We thank you for your wisdom, for your guidance. We pray that your angels are charged over every one of your children, even watching this morning right now, that they will never leave their side, that the blood was shed on Calvary would be upon your children, that the enemy will never allow your children to see his kingdom, that he will be stopped, that he will be blocked concerning them. Father, I pray even in their personal lives, whatever the devil is trying to do will not succeed. And I pray that your children will feed on your word so that they can develop their own inner strength. Cover them in your blood. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. God bless you. Have a beautiful week. I will see you next week.